I want to talk to you about property next. I want to talk to you about property tenure is my topic now. And we'll stay on the whiteboard because I kind of like the whiteboard. So I want to talk about property tenure. Now, when we talk about property tenure, there you go, we're talking here about how property is owned. And I'm talking here about the UK, not just England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland. They're all different parts of the UK. We often talk about English and Welsh law, don't we? And in English and Welsh law, we have freehold and we have leasehold. And we know about those because you studied those before. Leasehold, though, a lot of people don't know that we're the only two countries in the world still to have leasehold properties. Nobody else has it anymore, which tells me there's something wrong with it. And there is, because it's awful. It's a thing of the past. It should be gone. But we still hang on to it. And I'll tell you why in a second or two. So England and Wales has leasehold and freehold. In Scotland, it's very different and better, actually, if I might be so bold to say so. And people might want to sort of comment on that one, but that's entirely up to you. The Scots law, when it comes to property, is very different for those of you studying your sea maps north of the border. In fact, if you're not even north of the border, you should understand how Scots law works, because nowadays you have clients from all over the UK, so you should know how it works, really. Now, in Scotland, they have very, very little, if any at all, leasehold. They have what's called absolute or outright ownership. So here we're talking about Scots law. Scots law. Now in Scotland, as I mentioned to you, they have what's called outright or absolute ownership. Absolute, let's put that up there for you so you can see that. Ownership. They got rid of freehold a few years ago, which is a bit ancient really. And they have this thing called outright or absolute ownership, which means you own the thing forever. You know, there's no term of ownership or any of that palaver. You own it forever. Obviously, for freehold properties, that's easy to see. But when you talk about a flat or an apartment, owning that flat and apartment forever is great. But the big problem there, of course, is how then do you handle the common parts in an apartment or flat? If everybody owns their bit forever, who owns the lift shaft? Who owns the hallway? And that's the problem, of course, that lenders need to overcome. And I'll explain to you how it works. Now, in Scotland, they have this wonderful concept called tenement flats, tenements. Now, a tenement flat, let's put a little title over here for you, is very much unique to Scotland. They do have them in New York, Brazil as well, I believe. But a tenement is something you might have come across, and I'm going to tell you a bit more about that, and then I'll explain how it all works. Now, a tenement block is pretty much a flat or an apartment block, mostly in Edinburgh and Glasgow. We've been looking at properties in Edinburgh. Daughter lives in Edinburgh at the moment, and we're thinking maybe getting an Airbnb at some point. And they're all tenement blocks, and these always used to intrigue me what they were about. Now, they're pretty much historical, and they were built in the past to mass the houses, or or house the masses, I should say, not mass the houses. It's a funny way of looking at it. To house the masses. It was the industrial revolution who drove people into the cities. They needed to house them, so they built tenement blocks. Loads in Glasgow and quite a few in Edinburgh. Of course, Edinburgh, they started building them much, much before. And they were pretty much built as a house on top of another house. That's how they kind of started off. So if you take a look at the picture of an apartment block here, here's a tenement block for you. No taller normally than 3 to 5 stories high maximum. They tended to be built to correspond to the width of the road. So the width of the road equated to the height of the building. It's quite a quaint way of looking at it, isn't it? But they were built as properties separated by the horizontal. So you see I've got 4 tenements, as they're known. Each is a house in its own right, okay, you appreciate, with its own rooms, etc., separated by the horizontal. That's how they were originally built. Obviously, they're all changed now, and sometimes there's more than one house, if you like, on each floor. But they're built as blocks. You don't get like great rows of these things. We do, but they're kind of connected blocks, if you like, along a row. You don't get massive high rise. That's a different world altogether. So they're actually quite palatial, high ceilings. Some in Edinburgh are worth millions. You know, they're gorgeous properties, absolutely lovely. Most were demolished in Glasgow to make way for flats and high-rise because they weren't particularly very attractive, but the ones remaining are very desirable and easily mortgageable as well. So that's your tenement, really. That's pretty much how it works. Now, when it comes to how it's owned, they are owned as outright or absolute ownership. They don't have leasehold, as I said to you. And what they do here is that who pays for common parts? Well, the title deeds or the Tenement Act of 2004, if you want a bit of a date there, sets out the procedures. So the title deeds of the property or the Tenement Act of 2004 sets out the procedures as to how the common parts are maintained. And what it does, it can set up a tenement management scheme. And a tenement management scheme has all of the owners of the block as part of the scheme, and you can like vote in a manager, a facilitator, a chair, whatever you want to call them, and he or she operates and controls the management scheme. And people put money into the scheme. Money is then used to fix roofs, sort out lifts if there are any. Usually no apartments. They're usually stairs, actually. The vast majority of them. There's a stairway that usually goes up in the middle and goes round and round and round and round and round to the top. You've got gardens, landscaping, etc. It's all done by the tenement management scheme. The great thing is there's no freeholder. Goodness for that. Such an old thing. There's no freeholder. There's no one person or company who owns the block, and you own these tenements for the rest of your life. So yeah, how cool is that? What a great system. That's how it works in Scotland. And they've got it just about right, really, if you ask me. So what's the future then for leasehold properties here in the UK, or here in England and Wales, I should say? Well, unfortunately, the builders, the new build firms, I don't know how they got away with it, but they built leasehold houses, which have been banned now by the government. They built leasehold houses. Think about that for a second. You know, terrace, detached house, leasehold. So they only owned it for a certain number of years, with ground rents that would double after a certain period of time. And they would sell the freehold onto a management company to make a bit of money. It was a profit centre, which is wrong on all levels, however you look at it. I know builders are there to make profits. I get that, and shareholders want profits, but sorry, there was something wrong with that, and that should have been stopped. The lawyers who conveyed the properties for all these people buying should have done something about that, in my opinion. But anyway, I just have a humble opinion, don't I? But the good news is, though, that leasehold houses have gone, but there's still leasehold. We won't let go of it, which is the problem in England and Wales. We still have this leasehold thing. Houses, flats are being converted into leasehold still now. Why don't we go to some kind of absolute ownership? We have, it's called commonhold. And commonhold works really well, just hasn't taken off, which is surprising because north of the border, they've been operating tenements for donkey's years now. Love them. Yeah, we're looking at an Airbnb up there possibly. Just to, in Edinburgh, it's a great city. Lots of international tourists coming in. Of course, we want to go and see my daughter a lot more than we can. Although actually now we're looking at maybe moving up there lock, stock and two smoking barrels up to maybe East Lothian, somewhere around there. It's a nice part of the world now. So we'll probably buy an absolute outright ownership property. So I hope that's an update for you on property tenure. Message really, if you don't know much about Scots law, then learn about it. We've got loads of videos on the topic. It's a really good system. They've actually got it right up there, which is brilliant. I think the whole UK should basically learn from that as well. Other than that, I'll leave the topic alone and hope you have a good day.